It is episode number 8, season 2 of Stick to F1 Live. Anthony Mingioni, Jason Myrtetus, and if you're seeing this from a visual standpoint, I hope you are seeing two guests that we had last year, and it's that time of year again, time for the launch of the new F1 game, F1 2022, and we've got two great guests to talk to about it. We talked to them last year, like I said, and let's start with the Senior Creative Director of the Formula One game series by Codemasters and EA Sports, TheLeeMather. And from, you see his stuff on YouTube all the time, social media and content creator at Codemasters and EA Sports Rally, and a pretty damn good driver, PJ Tierney, both join us on this episode of Stick to F1 Live. Boys, how you doing?
Doing good.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun last year, so good to chat to you guys once more.
Absolutely.
My wife would like to have me returned. Can you guys take care of that? Because I've disappeared from the planet Earth because of this game and my now very huge obsession with it. As you guys can see behind me,
I can see your rig. Yeah.
I got a rig in F1 style, and I've become just completely addicted to the 10th.
You've got it in the F1 seating position as well. Well, sort of the more like the lean back.
Oh yeah. I'm like I'm laying down in a bathtub, as Martin Brundle would say.
Yeah, I've got my rig here. I have it more set up for rally than I do for F1, but I've got two wheels. I can just swap it in and out, so it's all good stuff.
Lee, let's talk about the new game because I mean, people are so excited. But where I want to start is just the growth of what has happened in the last calendar year. We know about the growth of Formula One. Drive to Survive is a big part of that. That's been renewed. And with the new eyeballs on just the sport, the growth of the game, I would imagine mirrors that pretty closely, if not even maybe outpaces it a bit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, anybody who's played the game over the last few years know that we've always been trying to draw in a broader audience and get people who are maybe around the fringes of F1 or not even Formula One fans involved. And you mentioned Drive to Survive. It just turbocharged it, really. You know, we were already on that journey to try and get more people into F1, and that just hit eyeballs that traditionally wouldn't have seen the sport at all. But it's not just down to Drive to Survive. It's obviously down to what Liberty Media have done as well. You know, they previously didn't have any social presence around Formula One. Now they've got a really successful YouTube channel, which is always broadcasting cool content that's outside of the race weekends. You know, they've got their social channels, which have got really great bits with the drivers, insight that you wouldn't have normally got. So there's so many new ways to consume F1 that just fits perfectly with gaming as well.
Lee, first thing obviously I want to ask you is biggest thing everybody is looking at is the new cars and how they're modeled obviously in the game. And what I wanted to ask for both you and for PJ in sort of the process of going from 2021 to F1 22, you know, in how do you, in terms of testing it for yourselves, in terms of as time has gone on, how have you had to adapt your own driving styles that you've had? How much have you had to unlearn from previous driving that you had to now newly learn going into this year's game?
It's pretty significant, to be honest, this year in the game, and for multiple reasons. I mean, as you mentioned, the rule sets changed quite drastically for the cars. So the downforce is now generated far more under body than it was by the wings over the top. So that instantly gives a different feel. The cars are bigger and heavier once again. There's more unsprung mass with the larger wheels and tires, and all of those things instantly make them feel different. But then beyond that, we've done so much work on the physics as well. So our tire model, our suspension, our transmission, they've all changed drastically. So I think the first thing you really notice through the changes that we've made is previously you'd maybe turn a little early for an apex to take the corner. Now they're so direct, they're so positive. There's that real feeling of directness in the car that you turn bang on for the apex. And then if the back steps out a little, it's catchable. It's got that sort of twitch feel to it. So I think through the rule changes that have come in through the sport and through the changes we've put into the game, you'll get a very different on-track experience, and something that I think so far the feedback we've had is it's way more realistic, way more direct, way more suitable for a Formula One car.
How much of that feel and that, you know, you mentioned the heaviness, the car's way more this year with the bigger tires and everything else. How much of that info and kind of, you know, validation of what you were trying to do from a technological standpoint in building the game was directly from drivers and F1 drivers and and guys involved in the real game.
I mean, to be honest, it actually started even before drivers. It started with every year we build the cars based on the rule set that we know and we see that gets published. But obviously, because the rules were so drastically different, we needed to understand what Formula One wanted to achieve of that rule set to ensure that our physics was delivering that experience. So we worked really closely with the team at Formula One, even trialing things in our game as well to get an idea of what they were expecting, because obviously the end goal was mix the season up a little bit, get racing closer, wheel to wheel, nose to tail, bring the cars into more exciting situations. And we obviously needed to achieve that with the game. So when we started building the cars, we built to the rules, but we also continued the discussion with the teams at Formula One as to what they were trying to achieve. And then, of course, recently we've had the esports drivers playing the game. They've fed back. We've had the teams have hands-on with the game. But ultimately, it's the esports drivers are really helpful, because they work with the same engineers as the drivers. So the feedback that comes back is insane, of an insane level.
I imagine as well with the esports guys that they're more gamers than drivers, whereas you have some drivers, like Landon Norris and George and even Max, like they do sim racing and so on. But I imagine having that esports link, like let's take Jarno Upmere, for example. He's the current champion, I believe, and he's got that link between the game and the sport, so he has access to the engineers at Mercedes, and they can relay stuff to him, and then he relays them and translates it into like what he gets from the game as a player and sends it on to Lee and the guys at Cody's to improve the handling of the game.
He's at Brackley already, I believe.
Yeah, they
working on next season. Yeah,
they stream from there already.
Yeah,
I know he did some live streams from there.
We're going to talk about him in a little bit. He's a freak.
He's so damn fast.
Total freak. No, he's a freak. Like this stuff. Anyway, we'll get to him in a minute, because he is a total. It's amazing what he can do. Go ahead.
Oh yeah.
Another question, Lee. I know you've for the first time in a long time you've changed the voice of the engineer, and it's someone that I heard from the most recent driver develop video, someone that you know rather well, Mark Priestley. So how did that kind of come about? Where Mark, what's your connection with Mark, and how did he sort of get in? How did this suddenly happen for him?
And did Mark kill Jeff?
You could say that, although Jeff was played by an actor, so the actor's still perfectly safe and well. Jeff, I think we need to do something more ceremonial, wave him goodbye, thank him for his years of service. He was a cherished character.
After we announced, or it was revealed that Mark was the new race engineer, somebody, F1 is, as much as it's a big sport, it's also a big meme pool of content, if that makes sense. So it's like there's a lot of skits and videos and stuff like that. Somebody made like a goodbye Jeff video. I need to find it and link it and send it to you guys later.
Yeah.
But it was like full on slow motion gameplay, sad music,
Titanic theme, the whole thing.
Yeah, the whole thing, the whole 10 yards. It was great.
Yeah, so back to Mark. Basically last year, potentially the year before, even we were doing obviously the usual sort of press activities in a very different situation than we've done previously. One of the interviews that came along was, would you like to do a session with Mark Priestley? He's going to sit and play the game and talk to you, and we'll do a stream on YouTube. I said, yeah, of course, I'd love to do that. And we did it. We had a great chat. Really nice guy. He's now presenting a number of car TV shows, which I'm not sure if you're getting over there. I think you get Wheeler Dealers, and there's a Wheeler Dealers show that he does. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he's really branched out into TV and broadcast a lot these days. And we sort of just kept in touch because we have a lot in common. We both absolutely love cars, petrol heads, his Formula One background. And then we had the conversation, right, shall we replace Jeff? Because a large theme of the game this year is we've replaced or we've rejuvenated or we've revisited core parts of the sport, be that the pit stops, formation, all of those things. But in terms of like Jeff, we thought, well, yeah, let's refresh Jeff and let's go for someone new. As soon as we got to the conversation of, well, who do we go to for casting? Who do we need to speak to start bringing in the talent that we want to listen to? And I said, well, I've got a suggestion. I said, let me just drop somebody a mail. And I dropped Mark a message, and he just said he would love to be involved. Literally within weeks, we had him in the studio in Southam. We had a voice test done. The audio team all just looked at each other and just went, we found our replacement. Perfect. And that was it. It was so simple, so easy. And he's amazing in the booth. He's one take every time. and he's able to let us know when we've written something that's maybe not factually correct, maybe not quite how he would say it himself, and he just brings more realism to the character.
PJ, let me ask you, because the adjustment, year to year is something that every sim racer, every gamer that, gets involved in the F1 series. And with the regulation changes this year, obviously it's a really significant regulation change in, normal Formula One, but also within the game. So how has the adjustment period been from going from 21 to 22? I realize it's probably not fully done yet and you're still adjusting. And maybe that takes even like 6 months until you realize your true pace on the new game. But what was it like compared from F1 2020 to 21, now 21 to 22?
I think 20 to 21 was pretty simple because the cars are pretty similar. There was some improvements on a couple of things. The main thing you needed to be careful with last year was, I think it was in low speed corners, the cars were very twitchy, especially like if you hit the curbs in the wrong way, they were very easy to spin, especially at launch. I think it got tweaked a bit later on. 21 to 22, I mean, the cars are obviously entirely new and all that, but because of the improvements in the system to the handling and the physics and everything else, the transition period was a lot smoother than me just talking as a player here. Just a little bit smoother than expected. Because it's all grounded in reality, it all makes sense, and it's like, okay, the car is doing what I expect it to do. It's not there's no like gotchas in it and stuff like that. Now, to be fair, I've only been driving it on the wheel for maybe about 10-15 hours because most of my time pre-release is focused on making content to help promote the game. So, taking screenshots and recording specific B-roll. So over the last couple of weeks, as the handling got more and more close to final, I did have some time to do some, proper seat time, actually plug in the wheel, turn off the assists, all that kind of stuff. And like even today, I was doing hot laps of like upcoming races and stuff like that, just to get ready, to record stuff. And yeah, it definitely feels better than last year. The thing that I found is that you have more control over the rear of the car. Like it used to almost, especially in I think 2019, it felt like an on-off switch. Like, okay, I've got grip, I've got grip, I've got grip, I've got no grip. And now it's like it's more progressive. You can kind of almost dance on the limit of it a bit more. When you go over the limit, it is very hard to catch, and depending on the type of player you are, it might be impossible. But it feels like the ceiling is higher before you can actually get like over the limit. Like going over the limit is always going to be tough, no matter what car, no matter what game, all that kind of thing. But you're able to push more, and I'm still figuring out the brakes a bit. That's always a challenge. That seems to be where a lot of the time in sim racing is actually gained or lost, because it's how brave and what do you do to stop lockups and stuff like that. So I'm still figuring that part of it out. But on the throttle, which is, I would say the most important part for many players, because spinning sucks. We all know that, right? You don't want to be spinning in a game when you drive without the assists and so on. So it's like it feels a lot smoother now. It feels a lot more predictable, and there's places where you can definitely play about with it. The other thing I've noticed, and it's true to the sport as well, the cars are heavier this year. And where the downforce is generated is a little bit different. Lee was talking about the underfloor and all that. And another thing is that the aero balance seems a bit more towards the rear, because that's like the floor sucking everything down.
So it's more planted in the back end.
Exactly. Yeah. We see it in real life. Like they have so much downforce that they're actually trying to strip downforce away in order to, not break people's backs when they're driving down the straights. And, you'll feel that in the game. It may feel initially a little bit more understeery, but once you get used to it, you'll get back up on pace right away, I think.
Yeah, that's, again, to me, that's going to be the key, because for me, Jason's all assist completely off. Me, I'm still under traction control medium. That's the one assist that remains for me, because I can never quite modulate from 20. So I'm going to be very curious if those new handling models will allow me to really kind of feel confident enough to cross that frontier finally.
Yeah, you're on the PS5 controller as well, so the improvements to the DualSense and how that has all been worked, that'll probably help you a bit more with the throttle as well. I have found that you can, like, when you've got all the assists off, you can run the differential a little bit higher. And for those who don't know, the differential controls the rate at which the back wheels spin in relation to each other. If it's higher, it's normally more oversteer, but you can actually run it a little bit higher now. I used to be afraid to put it on anything above 50, and now it's like I'm running 70, 80. And I'm even like around some of the really fast corners, I'm thinking, okay, I'm getting a bit of understeer here, like, Cops at Silverstone, where Max and Lewis had their arrangement last year. But that is like, it's almost flat when you're at 100. I need to get the right line in, probably need to tweak the tuning setup, but you can almost take it flat. Whereas before it's like, oh, I'm too scared to put the differential up because I'm just going to spin out. So now it feels like, okay, I think I can actually push now and actually throw the car into the corner and it might actually stick.
Last year, one of the patch updates kind of changed the differential settings. All of a sudden it went from, an 80 or 85 off throttle or on throttle diff to 100 off on throttle. And then, depending on what you like from an off throttle diff standpoint. And the brake bias kind of changed last year as well, where 50 was really kind of 54. What's the settings like? I know there's a lot more detail that's going to go into settings, which is going to create a lot more variety. Where you had the slider that was on a 1 through 10 or 1 through 12 scale last year is now on 1 through 50 or 60.
Yeah, that's the that's the wing angles, correct?
Wing angles, yeah.
Yeah, so what we did there was, it's something that the teams and the drivers have been asking about for a number of years. And the reason was previously, a Formula One team doesn't arrive at a track with a car that's totally not set up for that circuit. So we would always give a driver a car that was ballpark the right setup for a circuit. So you would arrive with a specific wing setting. So that 1 to 10 or that 1 to 11 was adjusting a car that was already set up for Monza or for Spa or for Silverstone. But what we've done now is really broaden that, and you just get a car. So it's up to you to find the best settings in that entire range. We've exposed the entire range of wing setup for the player. So yeah, essentially you could turn up at Monza and run a Monaco setup if you wanted the most draggy car in the straights in the world, or alternatively you could run Monaco with really low wings and find it almost impossible to drive.
And find the wall.
Yeah. So the only thing that we do to the car that's different now at any circuit is Monaco gains the extra steering rack, so it's got the extra lock, but the wings are the full range that we have to play with within the physics that we set within the physics bounds, but the players now got the full range without them being locked.
Let me follow that up. Is part of that because also some feedback that you got from F1 esports drivers, because that field, I mean, you can look at qualifying P1 or P18 and it's less than a half a tenth between the drivers, and then they get into just a DRS train, and strategy comes in, and who picks the best strategy when they pit, fresh tires, saving tires, and all that stuff comes into play. But is that also now to create a little bit of variance in setup, therefore in race performance for F1 esports drivers?
Yeah, very much so. It was feedback from the esports drivers and from one of the teams in particular that it was something they've wanted for a number of years, and their thinking behind it was exactly that. Anything that creates difference,
Red Bull, I guarantee, Rasmussen and Kiefer.
He's not giving that away.
No, I'm not going to name names. But again, it was superb feedback, and it was for that exact reason. It creates variation, and we've seen it on the tracks this year, haven't we? Especially in the practice sessions. I mean, both Lewis and George running polar opposite setups. In the practice sessions at Canada, and you see the difference in times there, but. Again, it'll give people the chance to, for example, somewhere like Spa, we know is traditionally a fairly low downforce circuit, but there's a lot to be gained in those corners that require downforce as well, and it's finding that absolute sweet spot where you don't sacrifice your straight line speed, but still have enough for the slower corners. And it's going to be interesting.
I want to ask you guys, because one of the big features obviously coming in this year is that you guys have had major circuit updates this year. We have one new track, obviously with Miami, but we've had 3 other tracks that have had major updates. Abu Dhabi is obviously probably the most drastic of them all, Barcelona, and obviously Albert Park. So my question for you guys is, how, based on your own testing and what you felt so far, Lee, where do you feel that the racing on those tracks has improved? On which track do you feel the racing has improved the most compared to the previous years that you've raced it?
So from the experience I've had, because of the amount of time I had to play the game, is obviously I've played Melbourne a lot because it's at the start of the season. I've played Spain a significant amount and Abu Dhabi the least. But for me personally, Melbourne, it's completely changed the character of the circuit. For a track that was the first track in our game for so many years that I would have driven millions of times, it was very much a traction limited circuit. It was always point and squirt. It was always that coming out of the tighter corners, trying to find the traction and get the drive off the corner. It's now very much a circuit that suits a modern Formula One car so much better. The fast flowing corners, allowing the cars to go nose to tail. And then towards the end of the lap, they've widened some of the exits of the corners as well. So you've got that period where you're able to follow nose to tail and be in a position to overtake into the final corners. It's really changed to suit the modern Formula One cars significantly. It's a lot less of a traction limited circuit now.
So I've noticed that when I've driven Albert Park, I've never felt like completely connected to the road surface. Some track, I feel that way at Portugal a lot of times. So I feel like everything's off camber, right? At Portimao. It's one that like I will sit there and stay on for hours to try and gain time. But it's a very difficult track because it's tough to overtake. It's tough to recoup ERS. And I feel like I'm not connected to it. Like I go to Jeddah and like, I feel like I'm pinned to that road surface on the game so much so. Like, you can make a mistake, especially in Sector 1, and that's a huge thing. And there's so much speed there in downforce. When you the downforce model with these new cars, do you just feel connected more everywhere? Or is it still track specific? Because there are certain tracks where there is more off camber. There is, that's the realism of it. That's the reality, that some of these tracks are not racetracks, they're road courses, they're streets of Azerbaijan and Baku, those kind of things. That's when I have some trouble in certain parts feeling connected to as well.
I think another thing to point out just briefly with Melbourne, because the whole circuit was redone, as we know, but real life, but also in the game, but also it was done with more technology than before. Like it's one of the tracks in the game that use LiDAR data, so proper like height and detail in the road and all that kind of stuff. You'll really feel that when you play it in F1 22. It feels, like Lee says, it flows amazingly well. It feels like a real roller coaster. And Jeddah is like that as well, in that, because that sensation of being pinned at high speed. The new like turn, it's now turn 6, I think. It used to be 9 and 10. But that
chicane's gone.
The chicane is gone. Now it just feels like you just shoot down there, and it feels amazing when you get it going. Because all the corners, you can take them all faster now because they're not as tight, which is absolutely great. Another thing to point out is Yas Marina actually does feel a lot more racy now. I've noticed that. The first 3 or 4 corners are the same, but they have pretty good corners anyway. Now you get down to the hairpin, and you can. It's a lot wider. It's a little cambered. You can kind of throw the car in there a bit more, which is very good. It gets rid of that fiddly chicane as well. The one that used to be at like turn 4 and 5.
Like a bottleneck to me always. Because you get to the chicane and then you're going into an even tighter hairpin. It always felt like everything was bottlenecking and the racing basically died.
Yeah. And the reason it was there is because there is not enough runoff to the grandstands, so it was for safety and all that. But so that's why they've actually pulled it back a bit and then got rid of the chicane and put in the big runoff area, and it's actually great. Then you get up to the other side of the circuit and the other hairpin, back where the chicane at the end of Sector 2 is, the little double left, right, left. Yeah, that's now just like, that's now a single bank turn.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm throwing that thing in there in like 5th gear, sometimes like 6th. And it used to be like, second gear, third gear, mind the curve, you'll spin over it, you'll spin over this one, you can't pass. But now it's like, we saw it with the race last year. You saw like Sergio Perez was battling back and forth with Lewis Hamilton for a while, and he just threw it in there and was able to make it stick. And it's like that in the game as well. It feels great.
Yeah, and he was able to get in front of Lewis for sector 3 and just slow back him up so much because you couldn't pass in those areas and you would lose so much downforce with the dirty air. Lee, like you mentioned bank turns, like turn 4 Zandvoort is outrageous. It's just like woo, let's go up, and then we go down. And that's one of those ones that's got feel. And then you come out of it and you're like, wait a minute, do I have traction in the rear or not? Because I feel like I'm kind of floating now. Of all the new tracks, like let's talk about Miami and putting an entirely new circuit in the game with new regulations and everything else. Did you go to Miami? And B, what's it like to drive that now course? Because it looks fantastic and it looks like there's a lot of technical elements, but there's a lot of high speed there too.
Yeah, so touchy subject. I was supposed to fly out to Miami, and the person I was supposed to be filming with out there, well, actually, it was Charles Leclerc. Obviously, he's our driver ambassador this year. We were supposed to be getting together to do something. There was a conflict in our schedules, which meant that I couldn't get to film with him. So it would have been a really expensive holiday if I'd gone out, and that's not something that I could spare the time for. So unfortunately, I didn't get to go to Miami. But you'll have to try and stop me going to Vegas next year. That will be whatever happens next year. If I have to walk, crawl, I will make Vegas next year. There's no way I'm missing that. But in terms of the circuit, I mean, I think I've spoken about this in the past. It's another one of those circuits. It's beautifully set up for modern Formula One cars for about 90% of the track. And then there's that one piece that sits underneath the underpass where it just makes a Formula One car feel so clumsy, so heavy, so out of its comfort zone. And then you've got an enormous long straight into a heavy braking zone, into a hairpin. And then the rest of the lap is fast and flat out. And I think it's produced really good racing, way better than I think anybody was expecting as well. I thought it was a real spectacle. And I think the modern cars, again, it's that they're really working well together to get the circuits balanced for what a modern Formula One car offers. A lot of the circuits have been around for some time and the cars have changed drastically, more so this year than any other year. So I think you get the spectacle when you match the car to the track.
So other things obviously I wanted to ask you about in terms of, I know PJ had mentioned about, you guys using LiDAR data, laser track, laser imaging on the track. Is Albert Park the main one? Are there plans for other tracks either now or in the future to also get that kind of treatment?
But wherever it's possible, that's always our go-to. It's not always possible. There's many reasons why it's not always possible that I can't go into. But for the likes of Zandvoort, for example, that's a circuit which was quite easy to get because it's on a floodplain, so they map out all the geography in massive detail. For somewhere like Miami, for example, we had CAD data from the circuit. We had photography go out. We had photographers go out there. We had a team from our studio out in Orlando who were able to help out with some reference as well. And then, of course, we had the stadium in there, which we took from the Madden game. So we were able to share that. So LiDAR's our go-to, but it's not always that easy. It is obviously the way to get the perfect track ribbon.
Let's talk about real quick, with the new game coming out and everything that goes with it. And you mentioned so much of the downforce is coming from the under part of the car, from the floor, curbs. Like that was an adjustment going from 20 to 21. You nip a curb at Bahrain, and at the end of sector 2, you're spinning, right? And there's some curbs that you're used to taking a lot of liberty with. Maybe Mexico turn 4, coming out of the straight in that chicane, those kind, and then all of a sudden now you're in a track limits violation. What's the curb usage like on the new game? Can you still take advantage of some of the curbs, or is it more going to keep these cars within the confines, if you will, of the Grand Prix circuit as opposed to some of the runoff areas?
It's a good question because that's an area where we've actually done a significant amount of work this year. So in the past, I know certain corners, certain curbs, if you rode them, obviously the car would gradually break away and you would go into a spin. So that's something we've worked on resolving because that was unnatural. Some of that behavior wasn't correct. But what we've really worked on, and this is a combination again of physics and suspension changes, is when you hit a sausage curb, for example, you expect the car to skip. You expect the car to be pushed off its line, but not drastic enough to ruin your lap, enough to ruin a qualifying lap, enough in some cases, as we've seen, especially with Charles at Imola. that was a fairly substantial hit to that sausage curb, and obviously it sent him straight on over the hairpin. That's a really good behaviour that we've got into the game this year. And Monza's a great example for that, because those chicanes at Monza, you can straight line them, but you need to take it easy on those sausages now, because it will ping the car up into the air. Not crazy amounts, but enough to be realistic and enough to upset your lap and to send you into a wall if you're taking liberties. So I think, again, as PJ mentioned earlier on with the way the cars feel, if something's realistic, you relate to it more effectively, and that makes it easier and more approachable. And I think you'll find that with the curbs this year, you'll start to understand which ones are going to be the ones that you can take a little bounce off, and sometimes they actually help you to rotate the car. I mean, that's a perfectly valid tactic, is using a curb to rotate a car. But then there's other times where, you'll find you get bounced into a wall or pushed wide into another car. Yeah, it's certainly an area that we focused on.
What is your favorite track, and why is it Imola? I love Imola.
Oh man.
It's funny you say that, because I do find myself, Spa's my favorite track. It always has been. I don't think that will change, but I do seem to find Imola's my current testing track that I go to. I just love everything, all tracks with high undulation.
Undulation.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Coming down that hill where you make that right, and you got to go down the fourth gear and come up the hill. Yeah. You can lose the back end there. Yeah, you just go from a situation of incredible downforce to none, like that, and there's so much time to be made there, and then heading into that next chicane. And you mentioned Spa. The only thing, I love driving Spa. The only thing I don't like sometimes is racing Spa because of track position. Because if you're on the final lap at Spa and you're leading, and you're not, and somebody's in your DRS, it's very likely, even if you have ERS, that you're going to be able to maintain that lead into that first braking zone.
Line all the way from Launchmont down to the bus stop. I actually feel the other way. I prefer the racing at Spa more than just the hot lapping, because Spa is, I think it's the perfect F1 track. It has this perfect mix of speed and grip, and it's in like chapters. It's like a little storybook every lap. It's like you've got your fast bit, you've got your Rouge and Radion, you've got your really long straight, which is uphill, just a little bit, but it's uphill, and then you come back down again through all the windy stuff, and then you got another fast section at the end.
Yeah.
So you can really feel the differences between like the different setups that people have been using. For example, has somebody turned the wings up to 50 this year and decided, okay, I'm going to be a demon in Sector 2. I'm going to make all my time there, and I'm going to be so far ahead that they won't catch me on the straight. Or have they gone the other way around and they've put it way down lower, and they've gone, okay, I'll blast by them with the DRS, and I'll save my battery for that as well. And then I just hope that I can hang on through the twisty bits because there might be less room to pass. And I think that will be interesting this year with the setup options, because you can have more wings now. You can have more wing angles. What will people go for? That kind of thing. Just to give a little bit of context, I was driving Silverstone today, and the default wing angle is, I think it's 22 and 28. So that I can't remember what it was in the last game. I think it might have been like 5 and 6 or something like that. Mm-hmm. But that was back when the scale was 1 to 11. Now it's 1 to 50. And so that's kind of where it is. And you can, like it's been said before, you can tweak it up and down, and there's more range there. That's why I think Spa's particularly great for that. And also, just very briefly talking about the curbs, like Lee was saying before, you're right. You can definitely feel which ones you can chase and which ones you can't. And also, another thing that you have to consider is that the back of the car runs much lower to the ground this year. I mean, we've seen that. It runs lower to the ground, then it gets off the ground, then it goes down, then it goes up, then it goes down. It strikes the ground a lot more. Like you'll see more sparks and so on in the more bumpy circuits. Like if they go down the straight and back with high speed, the car is being pushed down into the ground, is kicking sparks up, all that kind of thing. But you have to consider that for the curbs as well. You have to take care of it for, you'll see that some of the curbs before you might have had just enough clearance to get over them, and now you're striking them, and it means that the steering wheel will feel light as you kind of skate over them. Like for example, if you strike one of those sausage curbs, like let's say there's that long one on the outside of turn 1 of Austria.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you run over that now, you'll feel the steering wheel get light because you're just skating on the curb, and then you come back down the other side, and it's like, what's the car going to do? So that's just another thing to think about, is that if you've got your steering wheel set up right with the force feedback, like I turn on the understeer enhance thing, so it makes the car feel light when you turn it too hard and when it understeers. You'll feel that lightness when you go over a curb and you start skating. So it's like you realize, oh, I should actually put the car back on the road and not ride the curb so much.
Yeah,
that all affects the tire degradation, I imagine, too.
Obviously, yeah. But one of the interesting things there that, as PJ mentioned as well, is how it feels over the curbs, which I didn't mention, was the cars are running low this year. They're trying to, obviously, low is what they need because that generates the most downforce. It gets the best seal for the downforce for the underbody aero. But we've obviously tweaked the way that the ride height of the car works as well. So all of those different wing angles and the ride height play a huge amount into how much downforce you generate. But if you go too low, you're going to bottom out too much. Floor damage is something you certainly don't want. But also, if you're riding a curb too aggressively and it's one of the longer curbs, or for example, the exit of a turn at, say, Spa, as you're heading sort of down towards the back part of the circuit, down to the fast left, there's a curb on the outside. You can almost beach the car if you're not careful.
Yeah.
So if you're running an obscenely low ride height, you're going to be rubbing the plank, but also you're going to be gaining friction. So there's a degree of friction from that as well. So the ride height, so ride height's very important in relation to the wings this year, more so than ever before because of the way the aero is generated, and of course the behavior of the curbs. So that's really really cool.
Lee, how much of a challenge this year with F1 Life obviously starting this year? How much of a challenge was it to get the new supercars from Aston Martin, from Ferrari, from McLaren into the model that you have to work on the circuits, and how is it all in terms of how much of a drastic change is it going to be, plus how much of a challenge was it for you guys in terms of putting those elements into the game?
Yeah, so I think as I mentioned with the physics and the rules, that very much came from our discussions with Formula One. With the cars, as you can imagine, the teams were very secretive as to what they were doing with their cars this year. Mercedes in particular, Mercedes ran two different cars in the tests. We saw the one with the side pods and the ones without. Mm-hmm. So obviously there was a degree of us waiting to see which one Mercedes were going to run as well. And of course, I think there's going to be an evolution of the cars, as you can imagine. I mean, we've seen in the sport in previous years how quickly they get on top of new tech, new situations. So that's definitely something that we'll be keeping an eye on as well.
Let me ask you about the F1 esports guys, because we mentioned Jarno before, and I mentioned he's a freak. There's a lot of guys that it's disgusting what they can do on this game. Like, I see him in full wet, Jarno, doing a full rally slide at Spain on a hairpin and nailing it. Like, are you almost like he came from obviously karting and then was driving Formula cars. He was on the Formula Renault team. And the ability that he has from real world and now translated into the game and sim racing, is it almost mind blowing to you guys what these guys are able to do with F1 now 22 and prior, games and stuff, the way that they're able to control these cars and how the margins are so fine between all of these esports drivers. It's incredible to me.
Yeah, I think probably the most interesting thing is that they were always insanely talented. They were always insanely quick. Now that they're all parts of real Formula One teams, the data they've got available to them is putting them even further ahead. They're so knowledgeable of what's going on. I think there was an interesting comment you made earlier on about Portimao, and you mentioned your ERS management at Portimao.
Yeah.
Well, the teams analysed Portimao heavily, obviously, last year, and found that there was a certain point of the track where it was better not to go flat out because the extra charge you got at a certain point was more beneficial at another period of the lap when trying to qualify. And this is the kind of level of detail and data that they're now collecting in the same way that they do with the real cars. They're processing it in the same way, and they're driving to the data as much as they are their skills. And that's what's allowing them to win championships and find those really small margins.
Lee, wanted to ask you about certain functionalities with regards to immersive versus the new broadcast presentation. For those people who are not familiar with it or haven't seen the videos yet,
I love this.
The option to now have, if you want to sit back and watch the formation lap versus being involved with it, which is far more immersive. I know one of my questions was when you get into a safety car period, if you're in broadcast, how much flexibility do you have with regards to making a decision? Is there a function where you could go in for a pit stop to change tires while you're in the midst of that? Because I know obviously if it's the normal safety car in the normal function and immersion, you just you make that decision with engineer and go in. Can you do that while sort of sitting back while watching it?
Yeah, there's a period where you've still got enough control to be able to determine whether you want a pit stop or not. But then because of the nature of what we've done there, it's to take away that additional intricacy of the sport and to give players who just wanted the experience of it without the full intricacy and the full engagement. So the game will handle that for you. Gotcha. So it's very much a case of, we've seen a lot of people come into the game who are new to the sport and they want the full experience, but they don't necessarily want to do all of the full experience. And I think that's where exactly. And it's a case of, we want people to come in, play the game, enjoy the game, and then gradually, as they get more into what's going on with the sport and the intricacies, that's where it changes quite drastically. I think the initial thing for a lot of people is best cars in the world, cool drivers, amazing circuits, the glamour, the beauty of Formula One. And then it's like, wow, there's so much more depth to it than that as well. You start understanding the tires, you start understanding how they manage the ERS, you start understanding the fuel, the pit strategies. It becomes so much more, and that's where I think the game's now more scalable than it ever has been. And again, it looks cool. It looks very cool to see those in a broadcast presentation as well, to see the formation lap done in that way, to see the safety car done in that way. It's very TV style.
Yeah, just to even pull into your grid spot now, you got to nail it to get that. You may gain, a half a tenth based on how you slot into your grid slot to begin a race.
You can angle it as well now.
Yeah, I love that
because it's manual. Yeah. You can choose exactly where to go. It used to be you're pointing straight and you go, but you see sometimes
like Imola. I want to point slightly to the right.
Yeah, you want to point because the main straight isn't straight. But it could be like you want to do a tactical thing, like Verstappen is going to dive bomb you in turn one, so I'll angle it just a little bit to the left so that I can get in front of him off the line without having to steer. And that's just another thing to think about. And if you don't need that complexity or you keep overshooting the mark, you can turn it off because, like Lee said, it's all scalable and there's a lot of depth in there, but it's not all mandatory. It's like you pick the things that you want to do or you want to try and learn, and the rest of the stuff, it's like, okay, you can leave it for now and just enjoy it in the immersive style or turn some assists on and then come back later, and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Even on a start finish area that is completely straight, like Mexico, if I'm P2 there, I still want to be angled to the left because I want to get that slipstream because it's so powerful off the car in P1 on the left side of the grid. And I don't want to have to be turning while I'm trying to accelerate to get there. So I think that's real interesting. Let me ask you about cross-platform play because, the game is so sexy. I don't know if that's the right word to use. It looks so good. 21 was great. F1 22 looks just even better. The cars look so good on all the footage that I've seen on YouTube, and I've watched pretty much all of it. But when you look at cross-play and being able to play multi-platforms, I know that originally that was something that's not happening out of the gate, but could be a patch that comes in. Where's the status on cross-play? It's
still very much that. It will be a post-launch patch. We're not in a position to give out an actual date yet, but that is still very much our goal. It was, as you mentioned, scheduled to be part of the initial launch, but
I know something with Ukraine affected that for you guys, right?
Yeah, very much so. The team that were doing the work with us were based in the Ukraine. So as soon as things went the way they did, we just said, look, guys, get yourself safe. Don't worry about the game. We'll deal with that later. And to be honest, they were phenomenal. They tried to continue working where they could. And then when they all found themselves in safer locations, they were straight away back on call, straight away working. And they were very, very appreciative of the fact that we left them to do what was best for them and also make sure they were safe. But it took their mind off what was going on, and they were really getting stuck into it. So we'll be really pleased when we get to deliver crossplay. It's a really strong feature.
What is the biggest challenge with that? Because obviously you're dealing with different functionality. It's like different ways of reading data with 3 different platforms, from console with PlayStation and Xbox to, a computer PC model. Where's the real big kind of the hurdle you got to overcome to make that happen? Because it's a lot to ask 3 different, ways of gaming to speak to each other.
So there's multiple layers to it. I mean, I'm not the best place to talk about the sheer intricacies of one of the most complicated systems we do in this respect. But I think part of this journey started back in 2015 when we moved to the physics model that we've got now, in that basically, because it's deterministic, it will run the same on every platform. So that immediately means that it's not such a problem of, well, it's going to be different on this console and different on this console. The physics will always be consistent, so the cars will always perform consistently, and that's super important. And then in terms of the multiplayer, the big shift is that obviously the matchmaking is done by a different system. Previously you would use PlayStation's matchmaking, you'd use Xbox, you'd use Steam. Now it's done differently by systems that we've adopted and put in place. So those are quite vast changes as well. But yeah, we kind of started with that in mind. How would we ever do this if that became a thing back in 2015? And how could we ensure that, it started out with how would people on different spec PCs get the same experience? That's really where it came from.
I wanted to ask you, one of the more enjoyable things I always like about watching Formula One is to see if any of the teams are going to have an alternate livery for a specific track. We saw it obviously last year with Monza. We saw it with Ferrari. We saw, I believe, in Baku, Sauber did an alternate as well, and you guys did it as well last year. You had the white Red Bull last year. In terms of the way you've had it in the past is it's in the game for a period of time and then you rotate it out. I don't know, potentially with EA and with everybody else. Are you able to have at a certain point in the future be able to have selectable liveries, like say if a team almost like an alternate jersey of sorts to put into the game, or is that something that you're looking at down the line?
It's an ongoing conversation. It's obviously very much down to what the teams would prefer, and of course there are tech considerations. But yeah, obviously a team livery is super precious to them. It's that the sponsors are being showcased on a world stage, so it's very important as to which ones we have. It was great that we've been able to use different ones in the past, and that we're able to deliver the players the Red Bull livery to be used on the multiplayer car, for example. And we did the 75th anniversary Ferrari livery as well for that limited period in game. So there's certainly an expectation now that we can start to do more of that in the game. And it's the same with sort of driver helmet designs. That's an area that we're super interested in as well, because it's become a really big thing. They've gone from locked helmets to Lewis running 2 over the course of one weekend. I mean, that's very cool.
Yeah, he went back to the purple helmet that weekend. You're right.
He did.
And you see if you watch their social media channels, whether it's Charles Leclerc, who's a partner of yours, or Max Verstappen, they show their helmet for the race weekend, and then boom, there's a nice link there to buy a 1/3 scalable size helmet of theirs as well. And I have all these goalie masks in the background. I got to get some. Oh, see, that's awesome. Nice. Is that a Jolyon Palmer Renault?
No, it's Kimi Räikkönen in 2012.
Oh, that's Räikkönen. I was going to say I saw the back there. Yeah, that's the Räikkönen.
Yeah, that's it's the one race I went to. I did some back pre-Codemasters. I did some artwork. You see some of it on the wall, and
yeah,
it got pretty popular on Reddit. And I did like a little commission for one of Lotus's sponsors at the time, and then they were like, "Hey, you did great. Here's some tickets. Have fun." And it just blew my mind.
That's
I was like, okay, I'll be there right now. And yeah, got to meet Kimi. He didn't speak much. It was only
Kimi. You won't have the water.
Yeah, you will not have the drink. You will not have the drink. I will have the drink. But
is the drink hooked up? Kimi, you will not have the drink. I love him. It's so fantastic.
He's so great.
I got to thank you guys, because like my son's sitting in here now and he can attest he's a gamer, but I've gone from just like kind of dipping my toe in this with the game from time trial to doing some online lobbies and ranked races. And I'm in 2 leagues now, one out of Britain, the PRL league, and another one CSRL. And I won a race. I won at Portimao of all places. How about that, Lee? I raced at Port of Milan a 50% race, and the reason I won, I actually came in P2 during the race, but I didn't have any penalties. I didn't screw up turn 1 and overshoot that spot where you get track limits all the time. That entire race in a 50% race, and I ended up winning the race because I had the best tires at the end, came back and got within the 3-second penalty of the guy who actually came in first on the grid. So I'm doing league races now. I'm totally addicted to it. Totally. Like, it's out of control. I'm on the rig all the time.
Yeah,
and I
racing is
cannot
some of the best
wait.
racing you can get.
Yeah, I
It
mean,
really is.
it's so much fun. It's chasing a tenth, chasing a half a tenth all the time, realizing that, hey, there's more speed actually in a turn than there is on a straight. And then that's the way to make it up and all those things. And I'm looking so forward to F122 coming out in a week's time. And my wife's going to have to just say, okay, I'll see you in September. It is what it is. But you guys are doing a fantastic job with this game. The next time we convene should be in a couple months' time when cross-platform is in play. And the 4 of us will do a live stream of us competing against each other, a stick to F1 challenge. And we'll make it, since Lee's the boss, Lee will get to pick the track. So wherever where are you the fastest, Lee?
We're going to Spa.
Why is it Saudi Arabia? Because that's where I'm fastest.
I feel I'm rusty at all of them these days, but I think I probably would pick Spa. Whether I was fastest or not, it would be the most pleasurable for me.
I just had a league race there, and I improved my PB there. I'm at like a 143.2, but I just didn't perform well in the race because
I'm finally nailing Silverstone. It's to the point now where it's just I
love it.
Thoroughly just enjoy it. I literally can race. When you get to the point of a track where you can race it in your sleep, that's the best feeling. That is the absolute best feeling in the world.
Yeah,
I have fallen asleep watching YouTube videos of esports drivers, and by the engine sounds, I know what turn they're in. Like I go, oh, okay, he's in 7 at Bahrain right there. Because I can hear the deceleration and the brake and all that stuff.
Well, I can hear the lockup. He's at turn 10 because everybody
inside left.
Turn 10.
Absolutely. So
there was a video that F1 did on their YouTube recently. It wasn't related to the game, but it was they gave them, like, all the drivers, they gave them like a flip chart. It was a Grill the Grid episode. Mm-hmm. So they gave them all a flip chart, and it was like a really, really zoomed in version of like turn 1 at each track, and they had to guess what the track was. And I think you'll find that, like, as you've played the game a lot, we all have. It's like you look at it, it's like a straight line and a bit of a kink, and it's like, oh, that's Imola. Okay. Yeah. And then all the drivers are like, what the hell is this? That's a straight? That's not a corner. And then you have Seb going like, oh, is this one Miami? No. Is this one Miami? No.
Seb was the one who was always going to win that. You know that. I always just look at that because you know that man's memory. He's got,
oh man, when he rattled off all the champions.
Yeah, that's when you know it. These contests are over the minute Seb Vettel's involved.
Oh, he's the biggest nerd ever.
All right, so last thing, my stats on F1 2021. Ooh. I'm not going to tell you how much time has been played on it, but 222 wins, 667 fastest laps. 123 poles, 468 podiums, 16,766 laps completed. Lee, thanks for killing me.
Wow.
That's awesome.
I feel like I need to apologize to your wife.
You're saving my marriage.
Also, is podcasting partner, because invariably I'm about to go to sleep at night and I get a text. Look what I'm like. I'm trying to go to bed. I'm
sending them my PB screenshots and stuff. It's nuts. It's been
if I run the math here, and it's around an average of a 1:30 a lap, you've done at least just on track 400 hours.
Yeah, it's probably safe.
Yeah, all right.
Well, so not all laps are 1:30. I mean, I'm like a 1:07.
Oh yeah, you go to Austria, and it's like
1:03.5 is my PB there. So. And then you get into a league race, and I'm like, oh, I'm pretty quick on this track, and I qualified P16. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah, you're pretty quick, but like if Jarno shows up and he does 100 hours a week on it, then what are you gonna do?
Yeah, he's demoralizing to me sometimes. Lee, PJ, thanks. PJ, we can see all your stuff on YouTube.
Yeah, everything that I did for 20 and 21, that will all still work for 22 because, the physics are grounded in reality and all that kind of stuff. We might do some stuff on the official channel soon. We'll try and get some beginners tips and tricks out as well. And see how
everybody, here's where you can follow both PJ and Lee. Lee, you're on Twitter, and your Twitter handle is TheLeeMather. You're the senior creative director at Formula One Game. Follow that as well. Follow at Codemasters at EA. PJ is at PJ_Tierney, and the YouTube channel is linked there as well. And of course, make sure you follow Codemasters. And we're looking forward to the game coming out so much, and we look forward to our chat yearly with you guys. Thanks so much for doing this, guys. Best of luck with the new launch of F1 22. We'll be playing. We'll see you guys online, and thanks for doing this.
Thank you
for having us.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen.